The day after the prom, I broke up with Jessica. She frowned. Is it because I danced the first dance with Peter instead of you? I nodded. Fine. If you want to break up, go ahead. Just don't regret it later. Jessica agreed without hesitation. We had been childhood friends for over 10 years, and everyone knew how deeply I loved her. She was sure that I could never live without her. But what she didn't know was that this time, I was serious. I secretly changed my university application choices without anyone knowing. I applied to schools in opposite directions, one in the south, the other in the north. From now on, we would be worlds apart, never to meet again. Chapter 1. Joshua. You haven't changed at all. You still get jealous just like when we were kids, Jessica said, looking indifferent. The reason I danced the first dance with Peter is because I promised him when he scored 600 points on his exam, I would do it as a reward. Since he kept his promise, I couldn't go back on my word. You're breaking up with me over such a trivial thing. Fine. Let's see how long you can hold out this time. 1 month, 2 weeks, or 3 days. During high school, I had broken up with her countless times. It was always because of Peter. But every time, I ended up softening, apologizing, and begging her to get back together. I was as humble as a dog. I pressed my lips together. This time, it's forever. Jessica smiled. She smiled so happily that her eyes turned into beautiful crescent moons. She walked up to me and took my hand. I didn't expect the word forever to come from you. Seems like you're really angry this time. Come on, don't be mad. Okay. Just then, Peter barged in with a stack of documents. Jessica, I need to ask you about something. Seeing us standing so close, holding hands, he immediately swallowed the rest of his words. Sorry. I'll come back later. Jessica quickly let go of my hand. No need to leave. Peter, go ahead and tell me. Peter glanced at me cautiously, asking in a tentative tone, Joshua, is this okay? For the past 3 years, I had seen this fake expression countless times, from initially not caring to later on when I confronted him and scolded him. But each time, I was the one who lost. I was tired of it, exhausted. Love built solely on one person's efforts wasn't worth it. Do whatever you want, I said and turned to leave, but after walking just a few steps, Peter blocked my way. I frowned. Move. Peter's face was full of apologies, his eyes showing false sincerity. Sorry, Joshua, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but about the application process, I really don't know much. That's why I urgently came to find Jessica. I coldly interrupted him. Why are you explaining this to me? Get out of the way. He scurried off to the side, like a frightened little bird. Jessica couldn't watch it anymore. Joshua, Peter's just being honest. Why are you making things hard for him? Besides, he's already apologized. Even if you're upset, there's no need to shout at him. Right. Peter quickly explained on my behalf. Jessica, don't blame Joshua. Anyone would be upset if their date was interrupted. It's only natural. I couldn't help but stop and turn around to look at him. Peter, so you do know that? And you also know that Jessica is my girlfriend. On Valentine's Day in freshman year, we had a reservation, and you called right at that moment, asking her to go to your house to take care of your mom. On the Chishi Festival in sophomore year, Jessica and I planned to go to Disneyland, and you showed up at the entrance pretending it was a coincidence, turning it into a group outing. On Christmas Eve in senior year, That's enough, Joshua. Jessica interrupted me. Peter has already explained all of this. He didn't mean it. His family is poor. His grades aren't great. As class president, isn't it my duty to help a classmate? Out of so many classmates, why do you have to pick on him, the honest one? Seeing her frown deeply, I suddenly felt a sense of emptiness. I didn't want to argue with them anymore, so I turned around and left. Peter pretended to call out, Joshua, forget about him. Peter, just bring over your documents. I'll explain everything to you. Back home, I locked myself in my room and sat in silence all afternoon. It wasn't until it got dark that I moved several thick photo albums to the yard. I randomly opened one, and almost every photo had Jessica in it, whether happy, sad, regretful, or emotional. This was my entire childhood, my entire youth, but now, it would all be burned to the ground. Chapter 2. When I burned the first photo album, I expected my heart to ache, but to my surprise, I felt no pain at all. Instead, I felt a sense of relief. It was as if the huge weight that had been pressing on me for the past 3 years had finally been lifted. During dinner, my father was in high spirits. Son, with your grades, not only could you get into a university, but you could even go to a higher institution. Jessica is a bit behind, but she's good enough. Now you two can stay together. We've already agreed that once you both graduate from college, we'll arrange your wedding. Although we never had an arranged marriage, the families had always been close, and my father had already considered Jessica as his future daughter-in-law. I buried my head in my meal and simply mumbled, My mother noticed something was off and gently asked, Son, why do you look so unhappy? Did you argue with Jessica again? I shook my head. No, I didn't. I silently reminded myself, we just broke up. Father laughed heartily. Young people, it's normal to argue and have conflicts. Your mother and I were the same when we were young. Anyway, we always made up after fighting. My mother rolled her eyes at him. What nonsense are you talking? Our son is still young. Why are you bringing this up? Father awkwardly chuckled. After dinner, my best friend Bruno invited me out to unwind. I didn't want to go, but he persisted, so I reluctantly agreed. When we arrived, I realized it was a bar. Listening to the loud music and watching the excited crowd, my mood lightened considerably. Midway, I felt the urge to use the bathroom, so I went to the shared restroom. As I began to relieve myself, I suddenly heard a familiar voice outside. Jessica, why didn't you invite Joshua tonight? Jessica chuckled bitterly. What else? We had another fight over what happened at the prom last night, and now we're breaking up. He really knows how to cause a scene. I'd say this is the 80th time in 3 years, if not 100. Only someone like you, the school's most beautiful girl, can tolerate him. Anyone else would have stayed far away by now. Jessica laughed softly, her voice full of helplessness. What can I do? He's my destined Prince Charming. Prince Charming. Always a bit temperamental. I've long gotten used to it. Jessica, actually, I think Peter is much better than Joshua. He's gentle, kind, sensible, and always thinks of others first, no matter the situation. Why don't you consider him? Her voice grew softer, but I wasn't interested in hearing more. When I returned to the table, the scene was chaotic. Bruno was gripping Peter by the collar, his face dark with anger. Peter, on the other hand, was flushed red, his eyes brimming with tears, and he was tightly clutching a drink menu in his hands. I approached and asked, "What's going on?" Bruno let go of him, pointing angrily at the fruit platter on the table. "This guy brought the wrong order and now wants us to pay for it." Peter quickly explained. "No, Joshua, I just wanted to ask you for a favor. This fruit platter was ordered by the table next to us. I accidentally brought it to you, and if the manager finds out, I'll lose my paycheck for the month." His voice grew quieter, eventually turning into a plea. I glanced at the fruit platter on the table, and indeed, it wasn't our order. Looking up, I met Peter's tear-filled eyes, and a surge of disgust suddenly rose in my chest. "Why should I pay for your mistake?" Peter bit his lip, his voice trembling. "Joshua, we're classmates. At least, one fruit platter is nothing to you, but for me, it's several days' worth of living expenses." "Classmates," I sneered. "When have you ever treated me like a classmate?" Bruno chimed in from the side. "Exactly. You always act like a little angel, but now that you need something, you come crawling." As a friend, he was already fed up with Peter's pretentiousness. Just then, the bar manager walked over, frowning. "What's going on here?" I noticed Peter visibly flinch, his face turning pale. He quickly turned to the manager, bowing. "Sorry, manager, I brought the wrong fruit platter. I'll take care of it right away." The manager waved his hand impatiently. "Your performance bonus is halved this month. If it happens again, you're out of here. There are plenty of people who'd gladly take your place." Peter breathed a sigh of relief, nodding repeatedly, and hurriedly grabbed the fruit platter to leave. "Joshua, what's your problem?" A familiar voice suddenly rang out. I turned to see Jessica striding over, her arms spread wide to shield Peter. "If you have a problem, take it up with me. What's the point of bullying Peter?" Chapter 3. Watching her protect Peter so fiercely, I suddenly found it laughable. It had been like this for 3 years. No matter what happened, no matter who was right or wrong, she always sided with Peter first. I was always the unreasonable one. Peter quietly tugged at her sleeve. "Jessica, this isn't Joshua's fault. It's my own carelessness. Don't worry, I won't let anyone hurt you," she said, her voice filled with certainty. I couldn't bear to watch anymore and walked out of the bar without turning back. The night breeze hit my face, carrying away some of the lingering smell of alcohol. Bruno chased after me and grabbed my arm. "Joshua, are you really leaving just like that?" He looked confused. "Aren't you worried about Jessica being upset?" I stopped and gave a faint smile. "Upset? When has she ever cared about my feelings?" Bruno paused, clearly unsure of what to say. He was my best friend and knew all too well about the entangled relationship between Jessica and me, but right now, he didn't know how to respond. "Forget it. We've broken up. Let's not talk about her." I waved my hand. "Come on, let's go grab something else." We found a quiet tea shop and ordered 2 hot drinks. Bruno hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. "You really broke up with her?" I nodded, my gaze fixed on the tea in my cup. "Yes, but..." Bruno scratched his head. "You two grew up together. You've been through so many years together. Aren't you going to regret giving it all up?" I let out a cold laugh. "If she really cared about me, she wouldn't have hurt me time and time again for Peter." Bruno sighed and didn't say anything else. When I got home, my phone screen lit up with a message from Jessica. "Joshua, can we talk?" I didn't reply and simply turned off my phone. I slept deeper that night than I ever had before, 3 days later, early in the morning, my parents urged me to get dressed and prepare to go to Jessica's house for a graduation celebration. I had intended to refuse, but seeing their joyful expressions, I couldn't bring myself to say no. At Jessica's family's mansion, the place was decorated with colorful lights, and guests were everywhere. Jessica wore a light blue dress, standing at the door greeting the guests with a radiant smile. When she saw me, her eyes flickered slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she looked away. Before the meal began, the adults were chatting happily, and the conversation inevitably centered around Jessica and my future. I made an excuse to get some fresh air and slipped into the backyard alone. The garden was filled with roses, Jessica's favorite flower. A gentle breeze blew by, and the scent of the flowers filled the air. Memories flooded back like a tidal wave. When I was 4 years old, I first met Jessica. She was wearing a pink dress with 2 pigtails. Standing on the swing in the center of the garden, I hid behind the flowers, secretly watching her. She noticed me, jumped off the swing, and ran over to grab my hand, smiling sweetly. "Let's play together." From that day on, Jessica became a part of my world. In first grade, I was bullied by my classmates because I was shy. She stood in front of me, hands on her hips, and said to the boys, "If anyone bullies Joshua, I'll tell the teacher." After school, she would pull 2 pieces of candy from her bag and give me one. "Don't be sad. Eat some candy. It'll be fine." On some rainy day in middle school, I forgot my umbrella. Without hesitation, she handed me her umbrella and ran home in the rain. The next day, she had a fever, but still smiled at me and said, "I'm fine. Don't worry about me." Back then, her heart and eyes were full of me, until we entered high school. On the first day of school, Jessica, as the class president, stood at the podium, smiling as she welcomed the new students. That was when Peter first appeared. He was wearing faded clothes, standing at the classroom door with his head down, his voice barely audible. "Hello, everyone, I'm Peter." Jessica took the initiative to extend her hand. "Welcome, Peter. I'm Jessica, the class president. If you need anything, feel free to ask me." Peter looked up cautiously, his eyes full of hesitation, like a frightened little deer. He nervously shook Jessica's hand, then quickly pulled away, his face flushing red. Thank you, class president." Jessica smiled warmly. At that moment, I stood at the back of the classroom, a strange premonition suddenly rising in my chest. Chapter 4. Since then, Jessica's attention towards Peter increased more and more. She would walk over to his seat during class breaks, asking if he understood the teacher's explanations. She would lend him her notes and even sacrifice her lunch break to help him with his studies. At first, I thought it was just her sense of responsibility as class president, but gradually, I realized things weren't that simple. Peter seemed to know exactly how to get her attention. Every time he did poorly on an exam, he would stand in the corridor with red eyes, quietly sobbing, and Jessica would always appear immediately, comforting him softly. During gym class, he was always prone to spraining his ankle, and Jessica would never hesitate to help him to the infirmary, completely forgetting that we had planned to go for ice cream after class. I tried to talk to her about it, but every time I brought up Peter's name, her face would frown. "Joshua, can't you stop being so petty? He just needs help, that's all." I could never argue with her, and in the end, I'd give up. The conversation left unfinished. On Valentine's Day, I had made a reservation at a restaurant a month in advance, planning to surprise Jessica, but as soon as we sat down, her phone rang. On the other end, Peter's voice was tinged with tears. "Jessica, my mom is sick, and I'm the only one at home. I don't know what to do." Jessica immediately put down her bag, looking apologetically at me. "Joshua, I'm sorry, but Peter's situation is urgent. I have to go check on him." I clenched my fist, trying to keep my voice steady. "But today is Valentine's Day," she sighed, gently touching my face. "Be good. I'll make it up to you next time." "Okay." With that, she turned and left without a second glance. That night, I sat alone in the restaurant, staring at the empty seat across from me. It felt as though my heart had been ripped open. This kind of thing happened again and again. Peter could always find some excuse to take up Jessica's time. His bicycle was broken. He didn't know how to do his homework. He wasn't in a good mood, and Jessica would always choose to drop me and take care of his needs instead. Lost in those memories, I was suddenly pulled out of my thoughts by Jessica's voice. She still wore that indifferent expression on her face. "Have you had enough?" She casually plucked a rose from the garden, her tone carrying the familiar hint of helplessness. "It's been days since the breakup. Isn't it time to move on?" I didn't answer, just kept my gaze fixed on the tree branches swaying in the wind in the distance. The scent of the flowers still lingered, but it felt strange, almost foreign to me now. Seeing that I didn't respond, she laughed softly and walked up to me, tugging gently on my sleeve. Her actions were so familiar, just like when we were kids. "Joshua, don't be angry. I admit I was wrong that day. But Peter really is pitiful. He's a poor student, relying on odd jobs to pay for his living expenses. Even though it was his mistake with the fruit platter, you shouldn't have pushed him so hard, causing him to lose half his month's bonus. She paused, then added, besides, I already rejected him, didn't I? It was only then that I turned to look at her. Rejected what? She blinked, seemingly surprised that I was asking. Well, he messaged me last night, saying he wanted to apply to the same university as me, but I told him I had already promised to apply to a university with you. With his score, applying to a university would be a stretch. Her tone was light, as if she was sharing a trivial detail. A heavy feeling settled in my chest. So, in her eyes, all of this was just me throwing a tantrum, while she never truly understood how I felt. Jessica, you don't have to tell me all this. I took a deep breath. We're done. She paused for a moment, then burst out laughing. Isn't the anger still there? She moved closer, poking my chest with her finger. You know, you've always had this temper, and in the end, don't you always come back to me? I stepped back, avoiding her finger. This time is different. Different how? She tilted her head, a curious expression on her face. Is it because I promised to dance the first dance with Peter, or because of the fruit platter at the bar that night? She sighed. Joshua, you're really too sensitive. Peter is just a junior who needs looking after, and you are. Enough, I interrupted coldly, my voice sharp. For the past 3 years, you've always used the same excuses to brush me off, but the truth is, you always put his needs first, and I'm the one who has to compromise again and again. Her smile froze on her face, and her brow furrowed slightly. Do you really have to make such a big deal out of it? This isn't about making a big deal. It's about disappointment. I looked away, my voice quiet. Jessica, I'm tired. I'm really tired. Chapter 5. Silence spread through the air. In the distance, the sound of guests chatting and laughing made the moment feel even more ironic. After a long pause, Jessica suddenly changed her tone, now laced with a hint of coquettishness. All right, I'll be more careful from now on. Okay. She grabbed my hand and gently shook it. Have you filled out your application forms yet? My dad just asked about it. He said we need to double-check our forms together to make sure nothing's wrong. I pulled my hand back, my tone calm. There's nothing to check. It's already done. Really? Her eyes lit up. A university. Right, I knew you wouldn't. At that moment, I heard Jessica's father calling from the distance. It was time to start the meal. Jessica happily took my hand, leading me back to the banquet hall. Her fingers felt warm, as if everything was normal, as if there had never been a rift between us. But I knew, once something is broken, it can never truly be fixed. Inside the banquet hall, glasses clinked, and guests toasted each other in celebration. Jessica's parents saw us and greeted us with bright smiles. Jessica, Joshua, come sit. Jessica's father patted me on the shoulder, his voice full of warmth. You two have made up, finally. It's normal for young people to have some small arguments. I forced a smile and didn't answer. Jessica, however, naturally hooked her arm through mine and smiled. Dad, Mom, Joshua just has a small temper. He just needs a little coaxing. Just then, there was a commotion at the door. Peter, wearing an oversized suit, awkwardly stood there holding a simple gift bag. Jessica's eyes lit up, and she immediately let go of my hand, rushing over to him. Peter, what are you doing here? Peter lowered his head, speaking in a soft voice. I heard today is Jessica's graduation celebration, so I wanted to come and congratulate you. His gaze quickly flicked to me before quickly looking away. Jessica beamed, taking his arm and leading him to the main table, completely ignoring the surprised looks of the other guests. What was even more heartbreaking was that she made Peter sit in the seat that was supposed to be mine, the seat that symbolized the closeness between our families. Peter, don't be shy, just treat it like home. Jessica enthusiastically served him food, poured him drinks, and even peeled a shrimp for him, placing it in his bowl. Peter blushed and murmured a thank you. His eyes, however, kept glancing at me, a subtle smirk in his gaze. I pretended not to see it. My parents' eyes kept falling on me, their brows furrowed in concern. But, due to the occasion, they said nothing. The drive home was silent. Finally, my mother couldn't help but speak. Joshua, what's going on tonight? That Peter. Mom, I interrupted her, my voice eerily calm. I didn't apply to a university. Father slammed the brakes, turning to stare at me with wide eyes. What did you say? I applied to a university in the north, the National Defense University. I spoke slowly, one word at a time. My mother froze. Does Jessica know about this? I shook my head, staring out the window at the night sky rushing by. We've broken up. She doesn't need to know. That's nonsense. Father angrily slammed the steering wheel. The family's already agreed on this. How can you just change it? You've been with Jessica for over 10 years, and you're just throwing it all away. Love. I laughed bitterly. Dad, do you really think her behavior tonight shows she cares about me? Father was silent, and the car fell into a heavy silence once more. When we got home, I went straight upstairs and closed the door behind me. Outside, I could hear my parents arguing softly, but it quickly quieted down. I opened my computer, and the screen displayed the acceptance letter from the National Defense University. I gently ran my finger over the words, "Congratulations on your admission," and to my surprise, I felt strangely calm. My phone suddenly vibrated. It was a message from Jessica. "Joshua, why did you leave so early tonight?" I stared at the screen, and for the first time, everything felt utterly absurd. I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked all her contacts. Late into the night, I pulled out the flight ticket from the drawer. It was a one-way ticket to the north, departing in 3 days. Chapter 6. On the day of my departure, only my parents came to see me off. The airport was bustling with people, and the mechanical voice from the PA system repeated flight information over and over. Father patted my shoulder, his tone unexpectedly gentle. "Take care of yourself over there." Mother's eyes were slightly red as she stuffed a bag of homemade snacks into my backpack. "Remember to eat on time and don't stay up late." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Don't worry, I will." They gave me a few more reminders, and then finally stopped at the security checkpoint. I pulled my suitcase and turned to walk into the departure area, feeling nothing but concern for my parents, no trace of reluctance in my heart. Perhaps it was because I had already expected this scene, or perhaps it was because my heart had grown numb. After clearing security, I found a corner to sit and absent-mindedly scrolled through my phone. Messages flooded in from the class group chat. I opened it and saw a flood of photos, all from Peter. Snow-capped mountains, clear blue skies, smiling faces in ski gear, and silhouettes beneath the northern lights. In the photos, Jessica's smile was radiant, and she was very close to Peter. Some even showed them sharing a ski board, a moment of intimacy. Peter had captioned, "Thank you, Jessica, for taking me abroad to see the world. First time skiing, first time seeing the northern lights. These will be some of the most beautiful memories of my life." The group chat exploded with responses. "Wow, this is so romantic. Jessica is so good to Peter. I'm so jealous. Did Peter save the galaxy in his past life? I want a school beauty like Jessica too." Peter replied, "Jessica is really amazing. She's taken such good care of me along the way. I said I wanted to go skiing, and she didn't hesitate to book the tickets for me. Seeing the northern lights was also her idea. She said everyone needs some romantic moments in their life. Jessica even said she'd find a way for me to get into a university. I'm happy. We'll be classmates again soon." The words were dripping with affectation. I stared at the screen, my fingers stiffening, as I was preparing to head north alone. She was out there traveling the world with Peter. I closed the group chat, took a deep breath, and stuffed my phone back into my pocket. The boarding announcement came through the speakers. I picked up my luggage and walked toward the gate, not looking back. As the plane took off, the clouds outside gradually blurred. I closed my eyes, but Jessica and Peter laughing in the snow kept flashing through my mind. It felt as if my heart had been struck with a blunt object, but strangely, the pain wasn't as intense as I had imagined. Perhaps this is what it feels like when your heart truly dies. Half a month later, Jessica stood in front of Joshua's house. She rang the doorbell several times, but there was no answer. On her phone, Joshua's contact still displayed a glaring red exclamation mark. The message couldn't be sent. "Strange. Where has his family gone?" she murmured, frowning. Just then, Peter walked up from behind, gently tapping her shoulder. "Jessica, don't worry. Joshua probably just doesn't want to be disturbed for now," Jessica muttered. "He's never done this before. Even when we fought, he never blocked me." A subtle gleam of satisfaction flashed in Peter's eyes but was quickly replaced by concern. "Maybe he just wants to cool off, playing hard to get. After all, you've been together for so many years. There's no way he can really let go." Jessica nodded, though a sense of unease lingered in her heart. She looked down at the gift in her hands. It was a delicate watch, one she had specially chosen for Joshua in Switzerland. She thought that, just like before, if she took the initiative, he would immediately soften. "Let's go back for now," Peter said softly. "Once he's calmed down, he'll come to you." Jessica sighed, then turned and walked away. But after a few steps, she couldn't resist looking back at Joshua's house. The yard was eerily quiet, and even the rattan chair Joshua usually sat in was nowhere to be seen. Back at home, Jessica sat on the sofa and opened Joshua's profile. The feed was completely empty, and even his previous posts had vanished. He really deleted everything. A heavy feeling sank in her chest as her finger absently scrolled through the screen. Suddenly, she remembered what Joshua had told her. This time, it's different. At the time, she thought it was just an angry remark, but now, she was starting to feel uncertain. Chapter 7. On the day school started, Jessica woke up early. She carefully applied her makeup in front of the mirror, put on a new dress she had just bought, and even spritzed a little perfume. Imagining the surprised look on Joshua's face when he saw her, a smile involuntarily crept up her lips. He must have cooled off by now. she said softly to her reflection. Once he sees how much effort I put into looking good, he'll blush and compliment me like he always does. Peter was waiting outside her house, and when he saw her come out, his eyes lit up. Jessica, you look beautiful today, Jessica absent-mindedly responded, her eyes constantly scanning the street, hoping to catch sight of that familiar figure. Has Joshua come yet? Peter's smile faltered. Maybe he's already gone ahead, he said, trying to mask his unease. Jessica's steps quickened as she almost jogged into the campus. At the new student registration area, the crowd was dense. She pushed her way to the front of the list, eagerly searching for Joshua's name. A class, B class, C class. Her finger slid down the list, her heartbeat quickening. How can it not be here? She looked over the list again, even checking other majors, but Joshua's name wasn't anywhere. It's impossible. Her voice trembled. He said he already filled out the application. Peter stood behind her and softly suggested, Jessica, maybe you missed it. No, something's wrong, she murmured to herself, and without a second thought, she turned and ran out of the school gate. Jessica, where are you going? Peter shouted after her. We haven't registered yet. Without turning back, Jessica flagged down a taxi. Driver, take me to Jinchio Gun. Hurry. When the car stopped in front of Joshua's house, her heart was racing so fast it felt like it might burst from her chest. She trembled as she rang the doorbell repeatedly, but no one answered. Just when she was about to leave in despair, a taxi pulled up. Joshua's parents got out, carrying several large bags, as though they had just returned from a trip. Uncle, Aunt, Jessica almost rushed over. Where's Joshua? Where is he? Joshua's parents exchanged a glance, their expressions filled with complexity. Joshua's mother sighed. Jessica, Joshua, he already went to school. What school? Didn't he apply to a university? He changed his application and went to the National Defense University in the north. The words struck Jessica like a bolt of lightning. She staggered back a step. No, this can't be. Why didn't he tell me about changing his application? Joshua's mother looked at Jessica's devastated face and couldn't help but speak softly. Jessica, Joshua decided right after the graduation banquet at your house. He said, you two had already broken up. Break up. Jessica suddenly laughed, but the smile was more painful than tears. It was just something said in anger. We grew up together. How could we really? Her words trailed off, and the image of Joshua's decisive eyes when he said, I'm really tired, flashed in her mind. A wave of panic swept over her like never before. I need to find him, she exclaimed suddenly, turning to leave. Joshua's father stepped in front of her. Jessica, don't be impulsive. National Defense University isn't just any school. You can't get in. And, he hesitated, even if you get there, Joshua probably won't see you. Jessica stood frozen, tears blurring her vision as the pain in her chest made it hard to breathe. So this is what heartbreak felt like. Not the small cuts of quarrels, but a complete and utter shattering. Uncle, Aunt. Her voice was barely a whisper. Could you give me Joshua's address and contact information? Joshua's mother hesitated but nodded in the end. Clutching the paper with the address written on it, Jessica stumbled out of their house. She didn't go back to school. Instead, she headed straight for the airport. Before boarding, she took one last look at her phone. Peter had been sending frantic messages. Jessica, where are you? The opening ceremony has started. No reply. She switched off her phone. As the plane took off, Jessica looked out at the shrinking city below, and at that moment, she finally understood something. Once you let go of certain people, you can never get them back, and she had, with her own hands, pushed away the person who loved her most. Chapter 8. Life at the National Defense University turned out to be more fulfilling than I had imagined, leaving me with little time to think about the past entanglements. Gradually, I settled into the new environment and made a group of like-minded friends. Among them, the one who surprised me the most was Rita, the class beauty. She was cheerful and never complained during training, always wearing a bright, sunny smile. During every group activity, she would take the initiative to partner with me, and over time, we became close friends who could talk about anything. This afternoon, our class had a friendly basketball match with the neighboring class. As a main player, I played the entire game. After the match, my shirt was soaked with sweat, and I was panting heavily as I stood on the sidelines to rest. Here, Rita handed me a bottle of ice water and took out a clean towel. First, wipe off the sweat. The air conditioning is turned up. Don't catch a cold. I took the water, tilted my head back, and drank several gulps. The cool liquid slid down my throat, instantly refreshing me. Rita stood beside me, smiling at me with a bright expression. Suddenly, she stood on tiptoe and gently kissed my cheek. That's a reward. You played really well today. A burst of teasing laughter erupted from the crowd. I was stunned for a moment, still not quite registering what had just happened, when a sharp voice suddenly cut through the air from the outskirts of the crowd. Everyone's gaze immediately turned to the source of the voice. Jessica's face was pale, and her eyes were blazing with anger. She stormed over, shoving Rita aside, and pointed at her nose as she yelled, "Who do you think you are to kiss him? Stay away from my boyfriend." Rita stumbled back from the shove, and I instinctively caught her. Jessica was trembling with fury, her voice shaking with tears. "Joshua, let go of her. I'm your girlfriend." I took a deep breath and coldly replied, "Jessica, we're over. My life has nothing to do with you anymore." Jessica's pupils contracted sharply, as though my words had pierced her. She shook her head in disbelief. "No, how could you do this to me? I came all this way to find you, and this is how you treat me. Find me," I sneered. "Aren't you supposed to be with Peter? How do you have time to look for me?" Tears immediately welled up in her eyes. "We're not what you think, Joshua. I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please, give me another chance. I don't want to break up with you." The surrounding classmates exchanged uncomfortable glances, and the atmosphere became tense. Rita gently tugged at my sleeve and quietly asked, "Do you need me to help?" I shook my head and said to Jessica, "Go back. This isn't the place for you." Jessica bit her lip hard, then suddenly grabbed my arm. "I'm not leaving, unless you come with me." "Joshua, are you really going to throw away our more than 10 years of relationship just like this?" I pried her fingers off my arm, my tone calm but firm. "Love is mutual, but you never cherished it. Now, it's too late." Once, her tears would have broken my heart, but now, my heart was as still as water. "Joshua," she wanted to say something, but was interrupted by the arriving instructor. "What's going on here?" The instructor's stern gaze swept over us. Rita immediately stepped forward and explained, "Report, sir. This outsider suddenly barged in and interrupted our activity." The instructor nodded and turned to Jessica. "Student, please show your ID. According to National Defense University regulations, outsiders are not allowed to enter the training area without permission." Jessica frantically shook her head. "I'm not. I just came to find someone." The instructor frowned. "Please cooperate, or I'll have to ask security to escort you out." I glanced at her, then turned to the instructor. "Instructor, I'll take her out." The instructor hesitated for a moment but eventually nodded in agreement. Once we were outside the training area, Jessica followed me in silence, her steps hesitant. Only when we reached the school gate did she quietly ask, "Joshua, do you really not want me anymore?" I stopped walking but didn't turn around. "Jessica, some things, once lost, can never be found again. Go back, focus on your university." Suddenly, she ran up and hugged me, her voice trembling. "I don't want to. I can't live without you. Joshua, please, give me one more chance." I forcefully broke free from her embrace and turned to face her, her eyes red and swollen. "Jessica, I've given you countless chances before, but every time, you chose Peter. Now, I've moved on. You need to learn to let go." With that, I turned and walked toward the school gates, not looking back. Behind me, I could hear her heart-wrenching sobs, but I didn't stop. The setting sun stretched my shadow long, as though bidding farewell to a lost chapter of youth. I knew, from now on, there would be no place for someone named Jessica in my world, and my new life had only just begun.